house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hey everybody, it's Ian, and it's time for another episode of Native Film Talk, and today we are going to be doing the last episode of Reservation Dogs, Season 1, Episode 8. Today is November 25th on my end, so however you do your day, you do your day. This is mostly pointed at natives. Non-natives, you guys all kind of do Thanksgiving. I think natives were all on our own path of self-discovery and self-awareness of this day, what it means to us, what it used to mean, what our family grew up celebrating or not celebrating it as, and now how we want to recognize it. So whatever, for natives out there, whatever you do on today, just enjoy the day off work, I guess. I hope you're not working. At least that's the best thing I can hope. Enjoy time with your family, and that's kind of what we're doing today. Just spending the time stuffing our faces, not really having a recognition around it, just enjoying the time and the ability to get together and celebrate, because lens around COVID and everything going on in the world, I think it's just a good time for us to take a step back and enjoy each other's company if we have the ability to. So, let's jump right into the last episode of Reservation Dogs. This episode, Saturday with a V, just like Muskogee has a V in it. I'm sure that was the inspiration behind the title, but this episode's called Saturday. And like I said, my theory about this really lasting over the course of a week, Saturday is the day that they are heading out to Cali. And we have Sterling Harjo directing this episode. This is written by Migsy Pinsino, so he is actually not in this episode, but he did write this one. So this is Migsy's first episode in this series, in this series thus far, that he has a lead writing a credit. So kudos to him, hats off to him. So let's get into this one. I'll just read a quick synopsis, and then we'll get right into the plot. So as the Res Dogs prepare to leave for California, a tornado approaches. Most of the community takes shelter in the church basement, but Uncle Brownie rides through the streets looking for the right tools to divert the tornado. Bear's guiding spirit, William Knifeman, appears again to ask Bear whether he has completed all the tasks he needs before leaving town. Together in the church, members of the community, including the Res Dogs and the NDN Mafia, talk to each other and make key decisions about their future. So, I'm going to make a quick announcement about the show. This little blurb here, that's kind of what I'm going to try to do with episodes moving forward, whether it's movies, television. I'm going to try to just read a little synopsis, do the positives and negatives, final thoughts, and take us home. This might cut down the episodes by half, frankly, which is good for people that maybe want shorter episodes, but I think easier on me, so I can maybe crank these things out once a week like how I used to, because we got another kid on the way. January, we got number 2 coming along, and it's just going to be a lot more work and time that I don't have. But I think I was reflecting a little bit on the show and my podcast. I'm just like, I spend so much time digging through the plot review and writing that down. That's what takes the most time, and I don't know if I need that, because I have so many notes in my phone of like movies I've watched, and I just take notes during the movie. I feel like that's the substantive material that listeners want. Followers of the show, people who support the show, they want to hear the perspective of where this representation lies. Is it accurate, inaccurate? What kind of work was done behind the scenes in terms of casting Native people as a cultural consultant, language consultant, historical consultant? Was there any consideration taken to involve the tribe that is being represented, or nations that are being represented in the film? I feel like all of that I already do a pretty good job of to this point, but I spend too much time on the plot and frankly on the back end on getting ready for the show that may or may not be what people want. So I'm gonna give that a test for my next episode. I have News of the World. I did that one, so I'm gonna give that a go with the new format, and we'll go from there. And then Seinfeld's Native American Girlfriend episode, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm going to have Skoden Cinema be the host of Skoden Cinema, Tyler Randall, have him be a guest on that. And, go from there. But so let's jump right into this. So this last episode was a little personal. last episode, episode 7, being a little personal of my experience with anxiety, depression, and suicide, the suicidal thoughts and all that. So this one, I appreciated everybody who messaged me directly about how you appreciated my story and shared your own stories with me. It meant a lot for me to get positive feedback because, frankly, I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. And I think it just is a testament to the support that I get for this show. I really, really appreciate that. While I have a stronger foundation right now, it's still a big part of me. So I felt the need to share that, and I thank everybody who were along for that last episode. So this is the last episode of Reservation Dogs. I'm a little sad because it's over. At this point, everyone's already seen it. Hopefully, this isn't the first time if you haven't seen the last episode, go watch it. Don't let me be the one to tell you about it. But I was really excited to see this last one because I knew Dallas Goldtooth Spirit, a.k.a. William Knifeman, a.k.a. the Unknown Warrior himself, was going to be back. It's been a while since we've seen him. Been a few episodes. I think the last time we saw him was when Bear went to the IHS. I think that was the last time we saw him in episode 2, the IHS episode. So this episode, we have no new faces. Everybody we've seen. So I normally at this point, I do a cast review of like, hey, we are now seeing Wes Studi. We're now seeing Gary Farmer. We're now seeing Bill Burr or Bobby Lee or Kirk Fox for the first time. Nope. Everybody in this episode we've already been exposed to, have seen. We get Uncle Brownie in this. We get Big Zon McLarnon. So let's just jump right into it. And obviously the GOAT, Dallas Goldtooth Spirit, William Knifeman. So this opens up with everyone's getting ready to leave town. You got Spirit meeting Bear to start, but we check in with Bear, Elora, Willie Jack, and Cheese to see what they're doing the day of. What are they going to be doing to prep for the day as they're getting ready to leave to California? At this point, everyone's on board, and of course they start peeling off as the day progresses, but opens up with Bear getting met by Spirit, and he's like, your ancestors came to me, and they said you should go talk to that young warrior. You should go talk to him, so that's why he's here. And he's clearly a roaming spirit, he kind of has this like agenda, and Bear's one of his checks along the road. But he asked him, if he completed everything. He asked Bear, are you leaving this place better than it was? Nothing left undone. Kind of these like lingering, trailing off sentences, trailing off questions. He's like, I don't got any answers, only questions. And at this point, Bear's just like, you can tell he knows that there's something left he needs to do. But he thinks it's picking a fight with the NDN Mafia, which we learn isn't true. And then, Bear's just like, all right, I'm going to get my day started. Then we go to Willie Jack. She's having breakfast with her parents, reminds them it's their anniversary. Gives them a dinner for 2 at the casino buffet that she stole, of course. Cheese is hanging out with the grandma from the IHS episode, and I can tell you, I was so relieved to see her alive. For some reason, I thought like she was on death's door, that was like the last we were going to see of the grandma. Thankfully, she was just in the hospital for a short time, and even better, Cheese still maintains a relationship with her, hanging out, playing chess with her in her house, and he tells her, like, breaks the news to her. He's like, hey, okay, I just really got to break the news. I'm not your grandson. And I love that she laughs, and she's just like, sure you are, even if you're not. And I really appreciated that. If you know, you know. Sometimes you just have grandmas in our communities, because we're supposed to take care of our elders, respect our elders, and they are so good at taking you under your wing and just caring for you, imparting wisdom. I would say the majority of the time, but I really appreciated that just line of like, sure you are, even if you're not. I think most times when we have our grandmas that are not really our grandmas, it's mostly because our families, like family friends, and then they just become grandmas, or through clans. Even though you're not by blood related, you could have a clan, a kinship with that person that has you be your auntie, your uncle, your grandma, your brother in some cases. So I really appreciated that piece of it. And then we go to Elora's home, and we finally see somebody other than her. Frankly, I wasn't sure if she just raised herself at this point, but we finally see her grandma, and she tries to have a moment with her grandma of like, I'm going to California, but her grandma's just like, just put gas in the ride when you're done. So it's very clear Elora doesn't have the same support system maybe that Willie, Jack, and Bear have. And then the gang meets up to see Uncle Brownie. Uncle Brownie's looking for an axe because he knows a tornado comes, and he's like doing this like hand trembling thing, which is a completely different road to go down. I don't want to go down that road, but it's supposed to be like a soothsayer, kind of like I can feel it, something's coming, and he knows a tornado ceremony, and this is his like mission in this episode. He needs tobacco and he needs an axe so he can make the tornado change direction and miss the town. And so that's his mission for this episode. And I have no context with this one. I didn't consult my Muskogee friends. I didn't consult my Oklahoma friends on this one. So I apologize to the listeners. So I don't know the story behind the axe and the tobacco. I did ask. We had a kind of a intertribal episode with Okie Podcast where we had ripe potatoes, Macnez, host of the Macnez podcast, host of Skoda Cinema, and we all talked about it, and nobody had context around the axe ceremony. So if there's something that somebody else knows about this axe ceremony that he's doing, please write in. Don't really know what that's about. We don't have tornadoes in Arizona, at least to the point that our people would have had ceremonies for them. At least abundant or frequent enough that we would have the ceremonies to pass down. So this whole episode, full transparency, never seen a tornado in my life. I've seen them come close in Arizona. I've never seen one touch down. I've seen them come close, like when a tornado touches down in Arizona, it's a massive deal. Like it makes the news if it even touches down. It doesn't destroy anything. If a tornado just touches down, it makes news. So the fact that you guys have bomb shelters, and I say bomb shelters. See, that's what we have. We have more bomb shelters than tornado shelters here. You have tornado shelters, community tornado shelters all throughout the town, which is crazy to me because my only exposure to tornadoes are Sharknado and Twister, where it's like you either get into an oil changing pit or you have one in your backyard that you climb into. Other than that, you're kind of on your own. So it's cool that it makes sense that there's community tornado shelters. So that was pretty cool. So, and that's where we see like half of this episode takes place is the tornado shelter in a church. And I'll get more to that later. But so as the gang is getting ready to leave for California, they all meet up at the hideout. And that's where Willie Jack breaks the news. It's just like, I'm going to stay, And she's like, hey, but fuck it, I'm going to give you my money anyway. We made this together. We did this together. You guys can still take my share of the money. You guys need it to get to Cali. So go on, go have a good time. When you guys get settled, I'll come out and see you. And, at that point, he's like, anybody else? And no, but Bear's like, before we go, we got to fight the Indian Mafia. Tells them about Spirit. Tells them they need to fight the Indian Mafia before they bounce. And then, so at that point, the group heads off to Indian Mafia, about to fight each other, jawing at each other until like golf ball size hailstones come dropping out of the sky. And then everyone's got to get to the church. Everyone's got to retreat to the shelter. And what I think was cool about this is Big was about to arrest Brownie because Brownie had stolen a lawnmower and was just cruising, joyriding around town. And because of the hailstorm, Big had to retreat to the shelter, and he was like, and Brownie was just like, I need an axe. That's his mission in this episode. He's like, you guys go to the shelter. You guys go get protected by the white man's God. I can protect us. And he goes looking for an axe. And everyone's in the community shelter. And while they're all there, Elora, this whole time, you can tell, because Willie Jack dropped out, she's kind of getting bad vibes from the group. She's like waiting for the other shoe to drop for like, who is going to be next to back out. And she didn't want to fight the Indian Mafia because that could potentially derail her going to Cali. Like, she just wants to get the F out of the town. She does not care about this town at all, the people in it. And it's clear, like, you see her grandma, she's so passive. Not passive. She's just like not involved, not engaged. She's about to leave town for good, and she's just like, put gas in the car. Like, not listening to her, just doing her crossword puzzle, just in her own world with her own shit, and not giving Elora the time of day. So with Elora seeing Daniel's death, seeing him hanging there, clutching it at his feet, that's like a lasting memory for her, and having nothing in this town that's for her really other than her friends. And she's like, well, we're getting out together, so what I need here I'm taking with me, so let's get the F out. Let's get the fuck out of here, you know? So everyone left to the shelter. NDN Mafia is in the same shelter, and they had just almost gotten into a fight before the tornado chased everybody to the shelter. And there's tension. Tension between Indian Mafia and the Res Dogs. And so to break the tension, Moose and Miko, the twins, they break the tension with a freestyle. You know, White Steve gets involved too. The tension's broken. But Elora and Jackie break away to go talk on the main floor of the church. And Bear notices. He peels off. He watches them from the second floor. And then we get our second visit from Spirit. And I thought this visit was cool because it gives you an inclination as to why. I don't know if this is really true or not, or if this is just Spirit talking, but he was like, I don't know if he says, I don't know if you realize this, but I'm called here by the fear in your heart. And that was nice to add some context to his appearances that seemingly were random up to this point, because all the times where Spirit showed up were when Bear was nervous or scared. At the dumpster after he got beat up, obviously he was scared. In the second episode, in the IHS episode, after the drive-by paintball shooting in the first episode of the show, when he was nervous about his nose at the IHS clinic, you know, he was walking down the hallway and popped up Spirit. You tell it's probably fearful, scared. And then the morning he's about to leave for California, clearly he was so scared about leaving and so apprehensive and fearful about what was going to happen. Spirit saw him then. And last, he was fearful about why Elora and Jackie were meeting in private, and he was scared because he was trying to spy on them. So the Spirit interaction is awesome, you know. One, because now it's like, hey, it's not random, you know, even though he tries to make it seem like he's just some throwaway, spirit guide. You know, I like this last interaction that he has with Bear because it is the last interaction he has, but it's layered. He mentions him and Jesus are bros. He specifically says Jesus because he says both brown men cut down in their prime. And I like that this show does that. It really says like, hey, was Jesus really white? No. But why would we all think he's white? Because that's what the church does. That's what the boarding school system did, you know? And I like that they make another call to, hey, it's up, white Jesus. You know, and he's like two brown men cut down in their prime because Jesus was brown. You know, at least the evidence says that he would be brown. Also, he says that he's still working on something. You know, he's like, hey, beating up the Indian Mafia is not what the fuck I was talking about, man. Like, go figure out what you need to take care of before you leave because you're not actually making it better. And when he leaves, so... This is just a throwaway line that's written in there, but this was my favorite part of the interaction. When Spirit tells him, he's like, hey, you better get going. You know, they're taking off. And he's like, as Bear walks away, he's just, oh, grandson, walking that red road that way. Oh. Just like throwaway lines that a non-native person would never write, like jokingly. Like certain natives do say stuff like that as you're walking away, as you're leaving, but it's like good to see like native people making fun of native people. And for non-natives, that like last line of like, oh, grandson, walking that red road that way. Oh. Like that's such a, if you know, you know. That's the best way I can say it. Like, and I feel like that's one of my like things that really touches my heart with this show is like you can clearly tell there's just certain lines that are written for native people that don't deserve an explanation because it's like too nuanced. It's too nuanced to describe. It's so specific to an experience that like explaining it makes no sense. And I really enjoyed that about this show throughout this entire show. And so now everyone goes back downstairs, Jackie and Elora, and at this point there's tension because Bear's like, you want to go sit with your friends over there? What are you doing sitting over here? And then shit gets laid out because Elora's like, what are you doing, spying on me? And then Elora tears into Bear because Elora's like, you know, you're irresponsible with your money, which is accurate. You know, you're out buying dick medallions and tracksuits instead of saving for Cali. And Elora accuses Bear of relying on Elora too much, which is accurate. And then Elora tells Bear he's a mooch, which is accurate. But she says, yeah, you and your dad would be proud, you know, and that's where she crossed the line. And this is like a Thanksgiving, Christmas, like, argument of, like, the one you dread. That's why you're, yeah. And then, so this is, like, deep, deep family shit that gets aired because it turns into a Daniel conversation. And Bear confronts Elora about her desires to go to Cali and says, like, you're going for the wrong reasons, which is accurate. And then they break into the tension. To break the tension, Willie Jack gets up and talks about Daniel in a roundabout way because she's like, today's my parents' anniversary, and they're still healing. You know, they haven't been happy since Daniel passed. And Willie Jack hasn't been happy either. And that's why she doesn't want to go to Cali. She says there's too much healing that needs to be done at home. And I really like the line that she includes in her speech. She says, like, I have so much more to learn from them. You know, they're not going to be around forever. And that's the price to pay sometimes. It's like you want to get out of the shithole. You want to get away from the res, even though it can be a place that tears you down and offers more opportunities for failure than really it has a more bleak outlook than off the res. But your family, you know, that's where your language is. That's where your language is. That's where you're going to get your culture every day. You're going to be exposed to it. So it's like, I have so much more to learn from this place, from these people, from everyone here. I can't leave. I'm not ready to leave. And then Cheese backs out of it too. He backs out of Cali. So now it's just Bear and Elora going to go to California. And Flashed Uncle Brownie, he's found the axe. He's like Lieutenant Dan, like holding the axe above the roof of a house, telling the tornado he isn't scared of it, waving the axe around the roof, and then flash to the storm ending. The storm just ends. We don't know how it ends. Everyone's getting out of the shelter. Everyone's leaving. Elora already bounced. Bear's like saying goodbye to goodbye to Willie Jack and Cheese. And then he goes home, says hi to his mom. He's like, you know, I was in the bomb shelter, the tornado shelter the whole time. Gives her a farewell hug without telling her he's leaving. He just knows he's hitting the road and will be gone. And sitting on his bags, waiting for Elora at the curb. But Elora never comes. She picks up Jackie instead, and they skip town together. And this interaction between Jackie and Elora was interesting because Jackie's been out of town before, the leader of the NDN Mafia, and she's like, bet you're happy you don't have to deal with your Uncle Brownie and his shitweed. You're happy you don't have to be picking up after those kids anymore. You know, the city's going to be great. You know, everyone sticks to themselves. Everyone does their own thing. And she's just like, sounds dope. But you can already tell she's like, fuck. Is this really what I should be doing? And Bear gets left hanging, sitting on his bag at the corner, and he, you know, obviously stays there. And then the last scene is Uncle Brownie. He's freaking naked in the field. I did not see this coming. Never in my life did I think I would see Gary Farmer naked, head to toe. But, you know, Reservation Dogs gives us things, so many things we never expected to see, and this certainly was one of them. And then what the surprise even added to that is Spirit comes. William Knifeman comes, and he goes, "Oh, old warrior," and you know he tells Brownie, "You put your prayer up, you put that prayer up, and we heard you. So we had to take something in return. It was either your clothes or your life." So I thought, hey, chonies is a good trade-off. So that's why he's naked. They took his clothes and payment for the prayer he's putting up, the tornado prayer, because it did miss the town. Everybody came out of the shelter, and they were like, oh, it looks like the tornado didn't even touch us. So it looks like Brownie's ceremony worked, his prayer that he was putting up. And my assumption up to this point, and that's pretty much how it ends, but my assumption is that the unfinished business that Spirit was talking about was Daniel. They didn't address the elephant in the room, which is Daniel, which is, why do we want to go to California in the first place? I really think that's what it was. It's like, if you're going to go to California for the right reasons, which is opportunity, which is trying to better yourself, maybe bring things back to your family, bring things back to your culture, bring things back to your people, but not just like running to get away from home, because that's the wrong reasons. And I like that underlying message to this show is, sometimes we do that. Hell, I did that. You just see home as a toxic place because of what it does to other people, and you almost impose that upon like everything of like, this place can offer nothing but pain, nothing but pain and hurt. So I'm gonna get the far away from this place as possible. And yes, that may be true in some instances, but it also is rich with culture, rich with language, and rich with the power of your people. Like, that's where your people are from. We saw that in the hunting episode with Willie, Jack, and Leon when they talked about how their people have hunted there for generations, for time immemorial. And so that's why to them, it's just like private property don't mean shit to us, Like, we've been killing deer and elk on this land longer than this place has been a country. So why would I respect those things, those boundaries? Well, I don't agree with that. I understand the sentiment. I think that's something with this show, is that it addressed suicide in a way that, like, that has never been addressed before. It addressed leaving the reservation in a way that I've never seen before on television, because usually it was like, oh my god, this place is so terrible. Isn't meth terrible? Isn't it terrible what it does to our people? Isn't alcohol terrible? Isn't the poor school system terrible? Isn't the poverty terrible? It's like, yes, it is, but that's not like, that's never a consideration when I'm leaving. And so, and when you do leave for those reasons, it's misguided usually. It's like you're just sick of who you are. You're sick of your people. You're sick of everything around you. And that's what Elora was. She was sick of the place and the people around it. Not necessarily the people. Like, she liked the people. She loved the people. And she loved Daniel so much that one of the people that was taken from her made her hate the place that she was, because she never got, you never got the indication in the flashbacks that she even wanted to leave or didn't care about the place. It was after Daniel was taken, she was like, that was one of my best friends, the people I loved and cared most about in this world, and that was taken away from me. So this is a fantastic show. So my prediction real quick, I think Elora lasts like 3 or 4 episodes in the next season before she comes back home. Realizes Callie's not all it's meant to be. I bet she starts hanging out with another crowd like the Res Dogs, who are hustlers, who steal for money, probably loves it at first, but it's probably all non-natives. And because she's a woman, she won't be the leader. Even though she does all the shit that she does in her current group, and probably won't be the leader. Probably some dickhead, like, white person, is like, oh, you can't be the leader, you're a woman, kind of thing, I'm positive that's probably what's going to happen, is they don't respect the matriarch, and Elora's going to get fed up and realize, like, maybe home isn't as bad as I thought. Maybe home is better than everywhere else. Gets culture shock, bounces back home. The rest of the group, I have no idea, and that's exciting. What do they do without Elora? I have no idea. Elora and Jackie are both the matriarch leaders of their respective gangs, and they have no leadership now. So who the hell is going to take the reins of both of those gangs? They're still going to fight each other. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Maybe they don't fight each other with the two gone. So I have no idea now that the alphas have left the group. So I think it's pretty cool to think about the possibilities. Let's jump into the positives, negatives, and then final thoughts. There's an interaction that I didn't talk about in the plot review where Big is breaking up the fight between the NDN Mafia and the Res Dogs. Right when they turn on the lights in the tornado shelter in the basement of the church, NDN Mafia and the Res Dogs realize they're sitting next to each other, and they had just broken up a fight by the hailstorm, and so all that tension is still there. When the lights turn on, they're like, "Hey, what the fuck, man? I didn't know you were sitting next to me." Like, they're starting like cussing at each other, about to fight each other, and Big doesn't say, hey, break it up, you shouldn't be fighting, let's focus on the tornado. I like that he gets mad at them because, and he says, I quote, hey, have some respect, you got some elders in the room. And they acknowledge it and they squash it for now, and then they start just whispering under their breath, but no explanation of acknowledgement of reality. There's no explanation. That's just like the reality of things. Like, you don't cuss around elders. You don't be loud around elders. You don't be disrespectful when elders are around. You be quiet so that they can talk. And it's just something we do. It's just one of those, like, if you know things. And I really like that they included that. And I think most people may or may not have understood that aren't native. But for native people, like, it just, like, that hits. That's enough to tell you to shut the fuck up, basically. Like, hey, there's elders around. Watch your mouth. Hey, there's elders around. Don't be silly like that. Hey, don't be jumping on shit like that. There's elders around. Hey, there's elders around. And then you just, the tone is set. They're like, hey, you're crossing the line right now. Drop the act. Calm down. Whatever you need to be doing, bring it down. Sit down. Don't be running around inside, all that, don't be running your fingers against the walls and making noise throughout the house, that kind of stuff. I really like that. Another positive, Spirit just jumps out at me. He is next level. While clearly a joke, he's a joke of a stereotype, which is amazing. We never get that as Native people with Native writing. So it's very clear that only Native writers could have done this. And I say that with certainty. Only Native writers could have done this. He made fun of basically like all the common stereotypes and tropes in cinema to date. The spirit guide, the spirit animal, the mystical wisdom, kind of basically the grandmother willow is the prime example. Like making fun of just that recurring stereotype and trope that how we've been represented. It puts all this like upside down on top of its head. Because Spirit is a joke, he rides into the horse, in a Lakota Lakota traditional outfit, and you're just like, oh, I've seen this before. He's going to be a spirit guide. He's going to teach him how to be a warrior. And instead, he's an unknown warrior. He never got killed actually in the battle. He was killed during the Battle of Custer's last stand. But he, his horse stepped into a gopher hole, and he got crushed by his horse. And he speaks in Indian speak at times, but he also like mixes up his language. Even he knows he's speaking in Indian speak when he's like joking around. Like he's making a mockery of the tone that is used historically. That's why it's, hey, go walking that way down that red road, grandson. Oh. Like that's the kind of shit that like somebody would have found maybe from a Native friend, and they would have put into a script somewhere, and people would have gobbled that up like, oh, that's how natives talk. Oh man, that's awesome. I want to go buy some sage now. I'll go buy some sweetgrass from World Market or from Five Below. Another thing is Kenny Boy. Another positive is Kenny Boy. I loved Kenny. At first I'm like, what is this character? Kirk Fox's character, the salvage owner, the junkyard owner, the guy who runs a cockfighting ring, who sells aluminum to meth heads or buys aluminum from meth heads, kind of nefarious character, but wears that super loose choker, has these random phrases from all these different tribes around, Walking Beauty and Hokahe. He has all these, he says Yat to people, except he says Yatahe. And he just says so it says, it means hello, but all it really means, it is good, but I'll use hello. Like his knowledge is so random. And I know so many non-natives like that. And it's kind of gross, but I really liked his character. And that's like a testament to native writers right there. Another positive, frankly, I love that there's 4 episodes dedicated to each of the 4 Res Dogs, because had this show been another show, I would have wanted, like, why? I want to know more about Cheese. I want to know more about Willie Jack. I want to know about Bear, Elora, and they do that in this show. Every single one of the Res Dogs got their own episode, and that would never happen in any other show. And that is probably one of my favorite. That probably is my favorite thing about this show, frankly. Out of Spirit, out of Kirk Fox's character, Kenny Boy, the fact that in all native writers' rooms understood the gravity of let's give the importance, the significance of let's give 4 native teens characters in a movie and a TV show. Let's give them their due. Let's give them a background that people would want to see that they never get to see. And I love that. Another great thing, Deer Lady. Fucking Deer Lady. Still one of the craziest things I've ever seen on television, in horror, in the thriller, everything. Like, that is native ghost stories perfectly done, in my opinion. And that, frankly, makes me feel optimistic about the future of native horror. Because that hit way too close to home. That was scary in a different way that I haven't seen represented on screen. That was scary in a way of like telling stories on a bus at night, coming back from a basketball game or from a baseball game or from a football game. That felt different. That hit different. And I really enjoyed that. Another positive, these are probably my last couple. My last 2 positives. Really, so they brought in a bunch of non-native people. Bobby Lee, Bill Burr, Kirk Fox. Great comedians, all on their own, but three very different comedians that have their own very different fan bases. And I'm sure that wasn't deliberate to say like, oh, these are three different comedians that have like three completely separate fan bases. Not completely separate, but there's not a whole, there's overlap, but there isn't. That wasn't intentional, but each of those three guys have their own separate cult following that they can bring to the show. And it's very clear this show got renewed for season 2, like in a hurry. And Sterling and the 1491s, they're comedians. So they show up for comics, like Bill Burr, Bobby Lee, Kirk Fox. So this is amazing. And what I've really enjoyed is on the podcast tours that people go on. Anytime you go on a podcast tour, you go on everybody's show. Just like Sterling Harjo went on, he went on Bobby Lee's podcast. He went on Bill Burr's podcast. He was on Mark Maron's podcast. Bill Burr, Bobby Lee, you've heard them on other shows too, like talking about Reservation Dogs. They have other things going on, but when they talk about Reservation Dogs, they give glowing reviews about what the set was like, how that set was just different. And you hear other non-native people like, really, what do they got brewing over there in Oklahoma? They got a season 2? How do I get on season 2? And if it's just like friend of friend, word of mouth, if somebody tells you that this awesome place is awesome, you're going to want to go, And I think that's what's awesome about this show is Sterling is creating a different kind of culture on set, a culture that isn't like a caste system. It isn't gross. It doesn't treat people subhuman just because you're not a top billed actor, and just because you're not a director or a producer, they don't treat you less than. And I like that story that I heard from Bobby Wilson earlier in my interview with him when he talks about how he kind of like schooled everybody. He shut down the set because that culture started to almost be an infestation at this on set early on in the show, and he stopped everything, stopped all operations, stood up and said like, "Hey, this isn't Hollywood. We don't treat people the way that you're treating people today. We don't talk to people, and we don't treat people. We don't act the same way you do in Hollywood. You're in Oklahoma. The people here are working here. This is their home. You are guests, so act accordingly." And that's way different. And I think people appreciate it. People love it. And I think it's a breath of fresh air to be like, God, this Hollywood like culture, this filmmaking culture at the higher dollar, higher budget arena, it's gross. You see all these call for walk-offs, call for a strike from like all these union workers because they're not getting paid the fair wage. They're working like gross amount of hours and not getting paid. They're working gross amount of hours and not being able to go home, working stupid long hours and like potentially risking their lives on the drive home. Like, it's dangerous. And this industry is gross. This industry does not treat people like people unless they're like a top billed actor, unless they're somebody that they deem important. And Sterling isn't doing that. So all that to say, I hope it continues to bring bigger and bigger names to non-native, big and bigger non-native talent to this show, because that's frankly what native filmmaking has missed up until this point. A part of like native filmmaking that has been a detriment is nobody knows who we are. So unless it's like Robert Redford or Clint Eastwood kind of like producing it, there's not a lot of people that show up for our films. But if Sterling keeps doing this, then people would be like, hey, let's go look at other native people and see how they run their set. Let's go to a Black Horse Low film. Let's go to a film directed by Tasba Chavez. Let's go to a film directed by Jeff Barnaby. And I bet they'll see the same culture that Sterling is cultivating. They do the same exact thing over there. And I think there'd be maybe a split industry at some point. And I'm excited for that. That's obviously kind of a gross assumption and obviously like a lofty goal, but I think it would happen. And the last positive, they brought everyone in for the show. They brought in all the stops. You've got Zahn McClarnon, Kiowa Gordon, Kim Guerrero, Janice Schmieding, Gary Farmer, Wes Studi. That's like a who's who walk of fame in Indian country, like native actors. And they're all in this show. You were basically just missing Irene Bedard and Tantu Cardinal, and I wouldn't be surprised if in season 2 those people make an appearance. Would not be surprised. Amber Mid-Thunder, freaking Martin Sensmeyer. Rutherford Falls got him. I wouldn't be surprised if season 2 of this, he shows up. Like, this show is awesome. They don't pull any punches, and they bring out all the stops, and it's amazing that a show like this is made for us. You know what I mean. And let's go to negatives. This is a very specific lens of who res people are, and unfortunately, there's not a huge demographic of Indian country that aren't represented. Like, there's a huge demographic of people that aren't represented. Like, this is a very, very specific piece of, like, an age group of kids that are represented. And so it's like there's rodeo culture, there's basketball culture, there's, like, so many different layers of, and it's even, like, within the different age groups. You know, the older generations, the older the generations are, the different representation that isn't being showed in this show. And that's not a knock on this show. That's a knock on people who don't know who we are and might sum up who we are based on what they see in this television show. While it is authentic, while it is pretty accurate, it's not all encompassing. Like, this is a very specific range we can identify with. And while there's some jokes that we can all identify with, like blurring out the eyes of an owl, like, we need more of this. And this is proof of this show that we need more, because it's not enough. As much as like early accurate representation for other races, they had to start from somewhere where they built it up. You know, they had to start getting accurate representation slowly, and slowly they could start branching out on different modes of expression, whether it was in documentary, feature film, TV show, reality TV. So that needs to get going. You know, this shouldn't be viewed at as like, this is who Native people are, even though it is. Like, this is a small piece of who we are, a very, very, very small piece of who we are, and it's not all encompassing. Like, everything you see in this show isn't everybody. You know, while I identify with a lot of this, it's not who I am. You know, how those kids dress, that's what they are. They're kids. I don't dress like that, you know. And I hope that people don't think that everyone dresses like that, everyone talks like that, everyone talks in that way, because this is a very specific piece. So that's just kind of a negative. I hope non-natives don't look at this and be like, that's who these people are. And a negative, frankly, is like the anti-black rhetoric. So I've changed my stance a little on this and being stepping out a little bit of a ledge, but I acknowledge that anti-blackness exists in our communities. That's not where I'm going with this. Like, anti-blackness is real in our communities, in our Native communities, and needs to be addressed. But I felt like Twitter and blogs, they kind of like shoehorned that argument into this show, where it didn't necessarily fit, in my opinion. I think sometimes we do that. Like, we're so ready to get our argument off of our plate and get people to talk about something we're passionate about, that we'll shoehorn it into something that may or may not necessarily fit, because we're so passionate about it. And anti-blackness in Indian country, there's a lot of passion around that, because it's real and it's gross. Natives should be more inclusive than other people, but because of our experiences with the government, with the churches, with residential school, boarding school, and the continued oppression and systematic oppression of our people, we are really not inclusive. If anything, we're like, we gatekeep too much. And that's really the root of it, is we gatekeep. And that gatekeeping continues to foster that anti-blackness in our communities. And those people that experience that, they are fucking tired. They're exhausted. And so when a show like Res Dogs comes out and all of Indian country is excited and they don't see themselves, it gives them an opportunity to say, like, you know what, fuck this show. I don't see myself, you know. Why is everyone so excited about something that doesn't fully represent everybody? Which goes to my comment earlier of like, this isn't all encompassing. This doesn't represent even a close to a fraction of who we are. And that's like my call to action is more content. Keep pushing out more content. We'll get there eventually. But my fear is, you know, with cancel culture, is like Sten Jati is a prime example of that. Sten Jati is not negative. He's on this show as Punk and Lusty, and he's not on this show now because of like 7-8-year-old tweets. And in this era of cancel culture, and I'm not opposed to canceling things that need to be canceled. But the prime example of when we overstep our bounds and cancel things that are still good is Trickster. Trickster is a prime example. Michelle Latimer was the showrunner of that show, the source material for Trickster was written by a native person. The novels, the Trickster series was written by a native person. The entire cast was native, and they were new native talent. It was new native talent. Joel Ouellette and Anna Lom. There was a lot of new, fresh native faces there. And it was just the person at the top that got canceled. For good reason. She got kicked off the show. But the entire rug was pulled from the show, and that show no longer exists. So unfortunately, we'll never get to see what Trickster could have been. And while I'm not a fan of Punkin Lusty's character, I'm not mad about him being gone. But I'm worried about what the future of our representation is when our foundation right now is so fragile. Like we're breaking ground, but the ground we're standing on is very unstable. So what if somebody goes after Sterling or Taika or the 1491s as a whole? This is a fear for anyone in the public eye, I'm sure. But for a show that's this groundbreaking, the ground is unstable. And with a show that has this kind of recognition, it's possible for anyone to topple it just because they don't like the show, like the people. And that's not to say if there's some negative shit in people's past that should be unearthed, go do that. But shoehorning things, shoehorning an argument, shoehorning issues where they may not necessarily fit. That's my concern, frankly, because you should never walk on eggshells as an artist when you're making a monumental leap like this, because we've never seen a show like this, and I don't want to have to say we'll never see another show like this. I hope we see more shows like Reservation Dogs. But I don't know. It's just kind of like unnerving that as a native person, I have to be worried that there's potential this show might go away because somebody doesn't like it, or a particular group doesn't like it. And I don't think that's the majority. I really don't think that's the majority. The majority of people love this show. Native people love this show as a whole. And I think that we should listen to those people that are expressing dislike and expressing disapproval because they don't feel represented, and take that into consideration and make the show better. And take that into consideration and have one of our executive producers, one of our lead writers on this show, go and peel off and make another native show that includes that and makes and further advances our representation narrative and makes it better. Pushes us further away from the stereotypes that have framed people's perception of who we are, and frankly damage our self-worth by allowing us to see that recurring negative stereotypes frame our perception of who we are as Native people, and hopefully removes us further from that self-hate, self-loathing, the Elora perception of get the fuck away from this place because this place is toxic. Hopefully it gets us closer to a place of self-love and honoring our self-worth and honoring our ancestors to say hey, they fought for us, I'm going to fight for me too, and I'm going to fight to be here, fight for my language, fight for my people. So I'm optimistic, frankly. I'm optimistic that we're going to continue to push and change the narrative of what is Native representation. And let's go to the final thoughts. So I love that the showrunner is clearly lifting people up with them. Taika did it. He lifted up Sterling. Those guys were bros when they weren't famous. I mean, they were famous enough, obviously. They both worked at Sundance. They got Bird Running Water connected them, but they weren't household names by any means. Taika hadn't done anything massive. Taika Waititi wasn't a name yet. But they were bros back then, Sterling and Taika. And when Taika got lifted up, he started doing, Thor Ragnarok, and he started doing Boy. He started doing all these movies. When he had an opportunity to become an executive producer, he gave one of his best friends a shot, Sterling Harjo, not because he was his friend, but because he knew he was a great artist that needed to tell the stories of his people. And what did Sterling do? Sterling didn't have a mindset of scarcity and say oh, I need to take care of myself. No, he was if this is the one time I'm going to have the opportunity to make a show with a big budget, I'm going to do it at home, Oklahoma, with all my bros, the 1491s, all the people I came up with along the way. And he brought everybody with him. He pulled out all the stops. And that is something to be lauded. That is something that frankly needs to be replicated. This show is proof that we're all capable in terms of ability. We just haven't got our at-bats. And this is proof that like Native people don't need to have this mindset of scarcity in this time. While it is like in this kind of like unstable climate, we have the ability, like people are listening now. People want to see our shows. People want to see our stories. Resident Alien, Rutherford Falls, Reservation Dogs, keep pushing on, keep pushing on. And we were punished for so long, frankly, because, you know, Sterling says it in a lot of his podcast episodes and guest spots he's been on, where he was told he was shunned from Hollywood. Why he left Hollywood after the Sundance Institute and came back to Oklahoma is he wanted to tell Native stories. And he was told, quote, "There's no money in Indian stories. No one is going to want to see that story." And now they want to see it. Now they want to see our stories, you know. And I'm positive they want us to also lean on them as much as possible, which is a perfect storm. They got the money. We have the stories. Just keep pushing and propping up the right people, the people who have put in their work, that have paid their dues, that had just not got their at-bats, like Black Horse Low, you know, and Sterling Harjo, Tazba Chavez, Bobby Wilson, Migsy Pinsino. Just keep propping those names up and getting them their at-bats, because I'm positive we're going to continue to change the narrative, and this show is just a perfect storm of everything, you know. And the last thing I'm just going to, you know, gush about Sterling Harjo real quick, but just like, I'm thankful that he was the guy that got this at bat. He is like the perfect person. He was like, you can tell he's a great leader of people. He is a great leader of people. He's very respectful of people, and he listens. That's in a leader, that is very important. He creates ownership. He takes people to a place where he wants you to care just as much as the person next to you, because you care about the person next to you. You want to make it so everybody feels included, and everybody feels worthy of being there, and everybody feels and is validated in their effort. And in all of the testimony I've heard from people who've worked on that set, they're just like, I can't wait to go back and work there again. Like, the best work cultures you see across the country are where it's not about pay at a certain point. Yes, there's a pay level in people's minds, but when people feel like they have the autonomy to express their ideas, and they feel like they're driving towards something that is significant, and they feel like they are valued, like, that's when people are most happy. And I feel like Sterling cultivates that environment on his sets, and he's just an overall good person. I had one chat with him when I was a guest on Nomadcast, a different Native podcast, and he just cares about making shit that he wants to make. And he doesn't want to badmouth people. He doesn't want to burn people to get along that way. Like, that's why he went back and made his films in Oklahoma, 4 Sheets to the Wind and Miko. He just wanted to make the films he wants to see. And that's like that. You got to respect that Kevin Smith type energy. Like, he came to this film not thinking like, oh, he wasn't thinking about his next opportunity. He was just like, if this is my only shot at a home run, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to bring everybody with me, and we're going to swing together. It wasn't an I situation where he was like, now I have an opportunity to show what I can do. No, he was like, I'm going to bring everybody from my upbringing, from my town with me, my family, friends. And I respect that so much. I don't think people understand how rare that is. For people who don't understand the landscape of what Native filmmaking has been like up to this point, a Native person, Sterling Harjo, got in at bat to do a show on FX. And he brought everybody with him. That is amazing. And that needs to be talked about more between now and season 2 coming out, because season 2 is going to be badass. I can't wait. All right, everybody. That was it. That was Reservation Dogs season 1. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope everyone enjoyed my mini series on it. I may or may not do this for season 2. I'm sure season 2 is going to kick ass. I'll do this again. But so upcoming, I got News of the World. I got One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Seinfeld's Native American Girlfriend episode, and I got a few more. I wanted to do kind of a Going Native episode where I just talk about the Going Native trope and talk about some movies that where they use Going Native. And just talk about why the fascination is of like going native in stories. Like, what is that all about? So I do have another kid coming, so I may or may not going to really try to get ahead of it, record as many episodes as I can before the number 2 comes along, so that way I can just schedule these things out. I do have some more interviews coming up. I did conduct an interview with a writer from Molly of Denali. So one of my personal goals of the show was to interview somebody who worked on that show and just pick their brain and talk about, like, how does it feel to be on one of the most badass shows of all time, one of the most badass kid shows of all time. And God, I love it. So thank you everyone who support the show. Those of you that are still listening, thank you so much. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you can. Share it with your friends, share it with your family. If you're on YouTube, hit a subscribe, upvote, like the video. I appreciate it. All right, everybody. Talk to you later.